I think only men should be homeless. I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think women should
Thank
be
you.
allowed to be homeless.
This is where the conversation was going to.
Because I honestly think that men need to toughen up. And I think if
Yeah.
men were forced to be homeless, they would learn how to be better men.
Yeah.
Because that's what made men manly in the past, was having to build houses and stuff. So if we just made men be homeless for like a year, I think it would fix a lot of problems.
That would
with
be
society.
so good, especially because we don't force men to do military anymore like they used to.
Yeah.
They make them homeless for a year. Let's see how they fucking
Yeah, make them just figure it out. But make them homeless in a country where they don't know the language. And then that way they really have to go through something, and then maybe they can like
be appreciative
and just stop being pussies.
Yeah, America's really full of pussies.
I don't feel good about being white every day.
This is the delivery mechanism.
And I'm just a female, but just a woman, just a white woman.
This is the payload.
If I was a white man, I would be functioning from a point of an even greater privilege.
If I see a group of young men, and they're like kind of boisterous, I get really nervous. And he's like, well, what if they're black guys? And then she's like, no, wait.
They want to use conviction rates to show the percentage of men that engage in sexual crime relative to women. They don't want us to actually look at the racial composition of the men who are going to jail for sexual assault.
And then they create a hierarchy, and it puts straight white guys at the very bottom and all the other men like just above that. And then you get onto the other identities, right?
It is impossible for the CDC, that is the Center of Disease Control, to find 3 years in a row parity in sexual assault victimization with significant amounts of that victimization done by women to men.
I think that it's a fundamental unfairness that women are allowed to vote on policies for warfare that they then don't have to go fight.
Men don't get the vote if they don't sign up. Women get the vote by default. So literally, men actually have less of the right to vote. Not that the vote is a right, because it's not. But they have less of access to the vote than women do.
Keep your vote, but get rid of the narrative that you're a victim relative to men.
So that's the goal. Why I joke about the 19th all the time. I don't think it's going away, because women would actually have to vote for that. And I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't feel good about being white.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with Allison, and this is Maintaining Frame. This feminist equality study proves men right and feminism wrong. Well, Allison, why don't you tell us what we're doing today?
Okay, so I've been looking at this study. It's called Harder Won and Easier Lost, testing the double standard in gender roles in 62 countries. And just to give you guys a really quick overview of what this study, what happened with this study. So feminists investigated reality, found out that feminist framework, like reality doesn't actually support feminist framework. And then they took the data and they jammed it into their framework, broke the entire thing, and then presented it and said, it sort of works if you don't look at it closely, but we're going to look at it closely. So essentially the overall finding of this is that around the world, let me just give the strongest finding. People do not like weak men. That is the central finding of this. You wouldn't notice that from its publications, the articles on it, or how it frames its result, but its most central and strongest finding is that people do not like weakness in men. They don't like vulnerability in men. They don't like men having needs. They just don't like it, Sam I am. Not with green eggs, not with ham. They just don't like it. And around the world, this is their strongest finding. Of course, what they ended up promoting as the important finding was the thing that they could sort of squint and squeeze and break and shove into their framework, which was there is a smaller inconsistent difference in how what they term gender equal nations and non-gender equal nations see men in the positive, like men being courageous, being hardworking, being sacrificial, being strong, being competitive, that kind of thing. The positives of being strong. In gender neutral nations, they don't like saying that about men. So in gender neutral nations, gender neutral, big quotes, they are still fine with shaming the hell out of men if they show any kind of weakness. But in the interest of so-called gender neutrality, they no longer want to recognize that holding men to a higher standard of strength actually makes them stronger than women. No, no, we don't do that anymore. We hold men to the same standard of strength, but we never recognize that they actually occupy that standard. So that's the difference. That's the difference. And they said, oh, look at that. Look at that. Gender egalitarian or gender equal cultures don't recognize that men are stronger. Therefore, they herpaderp more pressure somehow, male privilege, patriarchy backfiring. Our results are entirely accurate. It's not. It really isn't much better than that. But we'll go through all of the steps of how they justify everything that they say, and how it is all fundamentally wrong. So, again, in summary, feminism investigated reality, found that reality doesn't support feminism's premises, and then they broke the data and shoved it into their framework and said, see, it still is valid. Except in any other context, with any other scientific endeavor, at this point, they would be having to go back to the drawing board and change some fundamental aspects of their premises, because this does not support them. But of course, that's not the world we're living in. The world we're living in is a sophist game where feminists hide their conclusions in their premise, and hide their premise in their conclusion, so that they feel completely unassailable. And of course, academia keeps supporting them in being so. But we don't run. We don't run with that crowd. We don't abide by the rules of academia. So let's shall we just get into it? Or shall I do the things?
All right. Yeah, do the things and we'll get into it.
Yeah. If you want to yell at me because you think I'm stupid, well, actually, you probably won't do this. If you want to actually give reasonable commentary, you want to have your voice heard, feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Very best way for you to send your messages, and the very best way for you to tip us at the same time. So feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Monthly fundraiser is not open yet. Giving you guys a break. Probably do it in Friday or something. And maybe we'll do like a pre-game fundraiser on Sunday, but whatever. Not ready yet. Don't go there. There's nothing there. So feedthebadger.com/justthetip. I am not pleased with this item. I should probably thank the person who sent it in. I'm a little distracted because Voidcat is probably sensing my mild irritation, and she's decided that she wants to soothe the savage beast or something. I don't know. But anyway, let's get started with the abstract, Brian.
Okay,
and I will locate the person to thank.
Yeah, I'll start the abstract. Do you want me to do the voice with it? The my high pitched voice.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
so I'll read the abstract in that. We'll start with the title.
I guess I'm a bit of a child, but yes, do the voice.
Harder won and easier lost, testing the double standard in gender rules in 62 countries.
You have to do the tonal affectations too.
Yeah. Precarious manhood theory posits a double standard in gender rules such that prescriptions, shoulds, and proscriptions, should not, are endorsed more strongly for men than for women. Here, we tested this hypothesis by asking whether people view agency as more desirable in men than communion is in women, and weakness as less desirable in men than dominance is in women.
Okay, so essentially they're saying prescriptive is something you shouldn't do, prescriptive is something you should do, and they're looking at the shoulds and shouldn'ts for men and women, and they used to say, gender roles are more strict towards women, but of course that didn't fit reality. So feminism then pivoted to, of course, gender roles are more prescriptive proscriptive when it comes to men. That is, there's a whole bunch of things that men shouldn't do. That's because they're trying to maintain their privilege. They didn't actually say, you know what, if our confabulation didn't actually predict something in this situation, maybe we should go back and reconsider the essential components of our bullshit. No, they never did that. They never do it. Never. Don't. Feminism will never be proven wrong. It will only destroy its host country and host society. That's the only way you're going to get. It's going to destroy its host, because it will never be proven wrong. Even though it is wrong, it will never be proven wrong or accepted to be wrong. But anyway, instead of going back and changing their premises and saying, maybe something's wrong here, maybe something's rotten in Denmark, they just went on with their bad selves and threw out another epicycle, right? Another feminist epicycle. It's patriarchy backfiring. And also men, the privilege is so delicious that they have to constantly be destroying each other to maintain it. That's how they put each other first. That's perfect. Sign it, stamp it, throw it into the presses. And they keep doing this because they can't allow their fundamental questions or fundamental premises to even be questioned or even be framed as questions. This is the thing that I've been stumbling over for years. They don't even have a falsifiable question in relation to feminism. So it's not even in a position where it's done the first step of being falsifiable. So in essence, this is all a belief system we've all collectively decided to buy into that has no actual empirical validity. Oh, God. Okay. Continue, Brian.
Data from college undergraduates in 62 countries indicated that 1. Measures of agency, communion, weakness, and dominance are psychometrically comparable across countries. 2. Prescriptions, agency for men, communion for women, are variable across countries, whereas proscriptions, weakness for men, dominance for women, appear universal. 3. Double standards in prescriptions. Men's agency as more desirable than women's communion are larger in countries lower in gender equality and human development, whereas double standards in proscriptions, men's weakness as less desirable than women's dominance, do not covary with country-level factors. And 4. These patterns are moderated by participant gender in nuanced ways and are robust to control by individual level gender beliefs.
Okay,
Discussion considers the theoretical and practical significance of these findings for understanding how young adults, as cultural agents of gender socialization, hold men to asymmetrically rigid gender roles.
Yeah, it's really a bunch of this is such a dense bunch of academic-ese, but just simply they found, they're trying to massage this into their framework, even though it doesn't go. And even in their conclusions, they admit it doesn't go. But so they latched on to the one finding that could plausibly continue to support feminism, which is that in less egalitarian, I'm cringing because this is the idea that this has anything to do with gender egalitarianism or gender equality is insane. But in what they're terming gender equal countries, they are just more reluctant to recognize that if you hold men to a standard of strength and tell men not to be weak, and you don't hold women to the same standard, that men are going to end up being stronger, or even that men inherently lean towards seeing themselves in terms of agency and strength than women. So you have those cultures that are willing to admit the consequences of their own expectations on men. And then you have the cultures who are in deep denial, deep denial, and insist that even though men be held to a higher standard of strength and avoiding weakness, we cannot recognize that they occupy a position of higher strength and lower weakness than women. So, in other words, they found that the West is really delusional. And it's really delusional along the lines that we decided to be really delusional about, which was feminism. But they can't say that. So they say, oh, well, sort of found that less gender delusional countries have less gender delusion, I guess. Therefore, the feminist model is correct. Okay. Do you want to start with the, I did find out who I have to do a shout out to. Thank you to Doughboy for bringing this to my attention. Because it was, I just was originally going to read it and be like, okay, well and then it basically was, feminism investigates feminism. Feminism finds feminism is complete bullshit. Feminism reports another win for feminism. So I was like, yeah, we got to talk about this. All right, keep going, Brian.
All right, so well, that was the end of the abstract. So should I get into this part here, this first section?
Yeah, we'll discuss that.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Gender theorists have long proposed that the male versus the female gender role comprises a set of relatively rigid rules. And yet, no research tests this assumption directly by comparing the strength with which perceivers endorse gender rules for men versus women.
So, can I just add right off the bat? I just want to say
call me gobbledygook.
Well, no, just when you okay. First of all, gender theorists, like, this is, in my opinion, gender is made up. Like, the word is a made up word, and they actually literally made up jobs to wrap around those words. So I'm already like pushing back against this, in my opinion. Like, the milk's gone bad, bitches. Like, the actual root of the argument rests on the foundation of this whole paper, rests on the concept of gender. And I just don't think gender is real. I used to accept that as an idea. Now, to me, there's just sex, male and female. And within that, there's behaviors and there's a range, but we're not going to call that gender. Like, just because a guy says my favorite color is pink doesn't mean that he's a different gender. Like, I'm not going with that. That is gobbledygook right off the bat, in my opinion. And then, of course, they use this first sentence. Gender theorists have long proposed that the male versus female gender role comprises a set of relatively rigid rules. That first sentence is like one of the baseline presumptions of feminism, which is unproven. No one makes them rigid. Like, the roles, they were, let's say, what worked throughout all of history. Like, if there were any behaviors or habits or tendencies or jobs or activities that men and women did that were different, it was probably because they were unique to those people for the most part, like bearing children or, men dying, basically making themselves expendable. That's not a gender role, and that's not like something that's enforced or socialized into people, in my opinion. But anyway.
We got some interesting people in the special chat as usual.
Yeah, I know. I see that.
A Missy Elks 2039 says, nothing better than a woman with her own show speaking out against feminism. Did hubby give you permission? All right. Well, here's the funny thing. I'm speaking out about feminism, and I'm still able to do this stuff. QED, your entire belief system is nonsense. Like, you don't need feminism, and we never needed feminism, right? Never needed it. In fact, I remember, this is something I've said before on this channel. My mother died of lung cancer 2007, and she had a whole bunch of feminist professional friends. And at her funeral, they said she was a woman who didn't need feminism, and no woman does, right? Because she was a person who just decided to do what she wanted to do, and she did it. And if people didn't like it, they could lump it, right? That was the kind of person she was. She didn't need feminism. But if she didn't need feminism, then no woman does. All right. Let us continue.
Okay. Let's see. Where do we leave off here? All right. Yeah.
Here, using precarious manhood theory as a frame, We test the double standard in gender rules by asking whether people endorse trait-based gender prescriptions and proscriptions, i.e., rules conveying the traits that people of different genders should and should not have, more strongly for men than women.
So, again, this is, I don't know, like, there's no objective way to measure this stuff because it says we test the double standard in gender rules by asking whether people endorse trait-based gender prescriptions and proscriptions more strongly for men than women. That the traits of people of different genders should and should not have. Like, all you're trying to measure is basically somebody's subjective judgment of somebody else. And of course, men are more harshly judged. That's what they found, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe that's why men are better. I don't know. Like, I know people want to say, well, men shouldn't be getting judged, but I mean, like, maybe that was like making them more resilient, and maybe us like pretending like women should never be judged is making them into weak people, like just weak. Period.
Yeah, weak people, like the person in the special chat who lets feminism be her personality and her intelligence for her, do her thinking, and provide her a backbone. Well, I have my own ability to think and I have my own backbone, so I don't need anything to provide it for me. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's entirely true. We could be looking at something that maybe women should be held to a higher standard. Maybe there should be more, proscriptive don'ts for women. Right? Maybe the fact that around the world women don't get as many prescriptive don'ts, apparently, according to this study, is the actual problem. Not that men get too many. Then maybe we should just give women more. Maybe that's what we should be doing. But no, that's never entertained. And it's also never entertained that this is actually something. Now, I know that you don't want to talk about gender and maybe not look at the burdensomeness of this, but it's never entertained that this might be a unique burden placed on men, and you might want to put that unique burden into your analysis on who is quote unquote oppressed. That's never entertained at all. In fact, this paper is from the Global Gender Gaps, and the Global Gender Gap Index has a problem. And what the problem is that their main equality metric is defined as indexing the size of women's disadvantage relative to men in economic, education, health, and political arenas. I'm sure they're quietly dropping health right now, and also education, because women are already superseding men on those factors. But the problem is it only records gaps where women are behind. Gaps where men are behind are truncated at parity and do not lower the score. So, in other words, if men are vastly behind women on any of these factors, that's considered parity. And also, they don't even look at the factors that men generally predominate and probably predominated since the beginning of when they started this, which is workplace death, suicide, homicide, deaths in war, homelessness among childhood homelessness, adult homelessness. And around the world, men have also been found in at least some surveys, men and boys predominate in adverse childhood experiences. That is neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and like emotional torture, like high degrees of emotional abuse. Men and boys dominate as victims of all of them as children. So none of that is put into this equation. The Global Gender Gap Index looks at no situation where it knows it will find that men are worse off. And those situations where, it's more of a toss-up, they only consider it to be inequality if women are worse off. So this is cooking the books. A lot of book cooking in order to get these findings. And then in these cooked books, they look at which sex has pressure placed on it to perform its role, right? So they will not look at the negatives of the male role. And then when we look at the pressure placed on men and women to perform their role, they justify that pressure as not not a pressure, not burdensome, not something that you would put into the column of maybe not oppressed, but maybe sacrifices that men make, right? The reason why they don't do that is they reframe it as men maintaining their privilege because they have removed. So if you think of men running a race, right, they've removed all of the men who fail, maybe through no fault of their own. Maybe it's because of affirmative action or a society that's decided that it doesn't want to recognize men's unique strengths while insisting they have them. And they've washed out. They're homeless, suicides. They end up in violence, crimes. Like anything negative. They don't look at that. They only see the men who win the race. And then they divorce that from all of the effort the men did to win the race, all of the men who failed to win the race and earned themselves death, destruction, social ostracization, homelessness, poverty, and everything else. They ignore all of that. So they ignore the costs of running the race, and they look only at the winner's circle and say, hey, that's privilege. So when they look at the pressure to run the race put on men, they only look at the winner's circle and they say, well, the pressure to run this race is to maintain the privileges that men get at the end of it. And then they never consider that maybe the extra competence and status that men get at the end of the race is not a result of some undefinable privilege that men are just anointed by, like the privilege fairy comes to them and boink, with their little wand privilege. Maybe those so-called privileges are actually a result of having run the race. So they've actually attained competencies. They've actually attained knowledge through these high stakes activities that they're expected to do. Right? They've actually attained respect from their fellow men because of what they've run. No, we can't. No, it all has to be privilege. It all has to be divorced from the process. And it's infuriating. All right. So using this as a measure of gender equality, it guarantees male type disadvantage, shorter healthy lifespans, higher suicide and workplace deaths, conscription, harsher sentencings never count as inequality. They never are. They don't even look at those. Like the gender gap in global gender gap index never looks at a single index that could possibly show men at a disadvantage. Those are right out from the start. Any remaining male tilted advantage is automatically read as suspect privilege, while male burdens are structurally invisible in their models. So if women ever superseded men economically, that would be considered equality. If they ever superseded men politically, that would be seen as equality. They're already superseding men in health and education. Now we've got equality. So if men are a permanent, grinding, third-class group, the global gender gap index would look at that and say, look at all the fields of equality that we've had. Look at as far as you can see, equality. And they would never see the problems that men have. They would never bring that into the equation. So no matter how well every single woman is treated, that is only ever equality. No matter how better women are treated than men, that is only ever equality. Okay.
Yep.
I have a lot to say about this.
It's all right.
You want to read on? It's
all right. Moving on?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Specifically, this pre-registered study examines the universality of trait-based binary gender prescriptions and proscriptions among college students in 62 countries, compares the strength of endorsement of these rules for men versus women, and tests whether the double standard in gender rules is larger in less gender equal countries.
Show me the next section.
Yeah, I think I covered that. Yeah, keep reading.
Yeah, okay.
Precarious manhood and the double standard in gender rules. Precarious manhood theory states that manhood, relative to womanhood, is widely conceptualized as a social status that is hard to win, easy to lose, and must be proved repeatedly via action. Evidence from diverse cultures indicate that people around the world recognize the belief that real men are made, not born. In contrast, in many cultural contexts, womanhood is conceptualized more readily as a biological certainty that need not be earned or proved as regularly as manhood.
Okay, so if manhood is something you earn, then manhood isn't a male privilege. Like maybe you could say men are allowed to earn this. I wouldn't actually say men are allowed to earn this. I think that it's more, well, it's probably a combination of men are more inclined to this kind of status seeking, high stakes cooperation and competition. So, I mean, it's an element of that. But in some places, it is quite coercive, like the things that we talk about, like conscription and other stuff like that. But if you're saying that man is something men earn, then you have to contend with the fact that it's not a male privilege, right? It's something men earn. How is that a privilege? It's either earned or it's granted. If it's granted, it can be a privilege. Like it's a privilege to have the social value of being a woman because you just exist as a woman, right? If that isn't the case for men, then how is that a privilege? Maybe you can enlighten me, Brian.
How is it a privilege that men have to earn manhood while women just get it biologically?
Yeah, how is it a privilege
for women? I mean, in a way, like I said, the only potential, I guess I wouldn't even call it a privilege, but the only thing you could possibly argue is that, again, because we do treat manhood as something men earn, they get something out of it, women don't. Like they can act like children until they're 70 and we just let them, and that's not good for them. Like it's, but
yeah.
But even then I wouldn't call that privilege.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Maybe let's not do the voice though.
All right, I'll just read it
normal. Yeah.
Let's see. Boys and men presumably learn about the precarity of manhood status via socialization experiences, including pressures to internalize and uphold relatively strict gender rules. Gender rules are injunctive aspects of gender stereotypes. Whereas gender stereotypes describe qualities associated with people of different genders, gender rules indicate traits that people of different genders should and should not display. Why do they call them rules? Didn't we call them roles? Weren't they called gender roles for the longest time?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
We're evolving. We're evolving the conversation.
The commie language is evolving. Okay.
It's learning.
Let's see. Although all cultures socialize children to follow gender rules, precarious manhood theory posits a double standard such that rules for boys and men are stricter than rules for girls and women. Yes.
Yeah.
This assumption reflects the higher social status that men versus women enjoy in most societies.
You see how we just jumped the huge chasm here?
So because we hold men to higher standards and stricter roles, they have privilege?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you see, if you're held to a higher standard before you're given social value, you have privileges. I mean, you're more discardable if you don't attain that standard. But that's a privilege, guys. Women just get they get a glass of water. Just give a glass of water to a woman for just because she's a woman. But men have to run a marathon to get a glass of water. That is a privilege, guys. That's your privilege, that you have to work harder to get the same thing. You see how I'm saying that feminism investigates reality? It finds reality doesn't resemble its framework, and then it takes its data and just sort of shoves it in, and it's like, yeah, it works. It works. It works. Like a very, very fat woman squeezing into a bikini.
Yeah.
It works. It almost, sort of. If you squint. A lot of flesh being shown here, but anyway, yeah, just keep going.
All right.
It gets better.
Although all cultures socialize children to follow gender rules, precarious manhood theory posits a double standard, such that rules for boys and men are stricter than rules for girls and women.
Yeah.
Oh, I already read that part. I'm sorry. I should mark
boys
these.
and men-
Membership in the
just-
higher status gender group grants men more respect, esteem, and social influence, but these advantages come with a cost. The boundaries protecting what?
These advantages come with a cost. We just went through, okay? Men are more likely to be treated as expendable if they don't live up to a standard. But if they live up to a standard, people are like, hey, you overcame the expendability of being a man. Bravo! Bravo, men! You endured the ball kicking machine. Yay! And then they're saying that's a privilege.
Yeah. Well, because they get, according to this, they get more respect, esteem, and social influence. But again, you're looking at the winner circle, right?
Yeah, but also they're also looking at their big finding is that so-called gender equal cultures don't grant men this respect, right? They don't actually recognize that men, they should be recognized as occupying these positions of strength relative to women, right? Those are gender unequal cultures actually recognize that. In gender equal, quote unquote, cultures, men don't get that privilege. They don't get that status. So they just get, don't be weak. If you're weak, we'll kick you to the curb. Unlike your sister, her weakness is a call to action to make sure she's taken care of. Your weakness is a call to kick you out, kick you to the curb, and get rid of you. Like that's what we say in the West. We just don't say that's because as a man you should be strong, right? That's what makes a man a man. And as a man in train and about to become a man, a boy about to become a man, this is the standard that you are aiming for and you are uniquely capable of attaining because you're a man. They say that in gender unequal societies, and gender equal societies is just don't be weak. And of course, gender equal societies are the better societies. And of course, men do this. Men maintain this strict gender pressure, gender punishment, like gender filter, because at the end of the day, they get to be said to be respectable as men. So they maintain this gender filter in order to get the asymmetrical respect as men. You see what I'm saying? That's why they do it. That's why they run all of this hardship, is in order to be like, oh, you're the man. And this is what this paper is proposing. And yet, even though all of the hardship is still in the gender equal countries, but they just don't get that you're the man thing at the end. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're saying that the respect is why men do this, not protecting and providing for their families.
Right, they're doing it. It's just like men go to war for glory, not because they're fighting for their country or they're conscripted.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like even that assumption,
delusional enough.
Even that's delusional for sure. But even that assumption, again, that assumption about why men do those things only looks at the outcomes of the men who come back alive and get medals. So like they're looking at those men and they're saying, oh, that's what, like, not the dead men, the ones that never come home, but like the few who do and are decorated for it and, have PTSD and like whatever else. But that's not, we're not going to talk about that. Right. So like, even then they're looking at like, it's the apex fallacy. They're looking at the guys at the top and they're ignoring their problems, whatever those might be. They're ignoring how hard it was to get there. They're ignoring whatever struggles, whatever injuries or failings they had, whatever they're going through, whatever whatever that is, because they want to make the case that they're getting respect. Like, yes, if you went to Vietnam and you watch your friends like get killed, and you come back and you got shit on by protesters that hated the war, and everybody come after you, but you still wore your veteran hat or whatever, and then people would like give you, you know, accolades for what it is, which isn't really much when you think about it. Oh, you get to park a little bit closer to the restaurant. You get like you know, free meals at certain places, and people will tell
That's
you
why
thank
you
for
went
your
to
service.
Nam.
But what?
That their proposal is that's why men went to Vietnam.
Yeah,
Was to
they
get
went to Vietnam for that. Right. Exactly.
yeah,
That's
to
what I'm
get
saying.
closer
It's
parking
ridiculous.
spots.
Yeah.
And they also don't recognize that maybe running this gauntlet of greater stakes, basically greater pitfalls and greater expectations, is the reason why men get the respect, right? Like they've told, like the mentality that they're bringing to this is bizarre, because they think that simultaneously men have this massively difficult race in order to get the respect at the end, and that's the only reason why they do it. And they think that they're enforcing the difficulty of the race for the respect at the end, right? And they're doing all of this for no reason except, I guess, to give each other back pats at the end, butt pats at the end. And it's like, this is so divorced from reality. Like feminist conjecture is so divorced from reality in trying to understand why men do this. It's actually sort of hilarious. We construct this gigantic obstacle course before men will get basic human respect, or even respect for their skills in covering the obstacle course. And we did it completely arbitrarily. We just did it so women couldn't do it, to exclude women from it. It's completely arbitrary. And when we just did it because we wanted at the end to be able to pat each other on the back for running the obstacle course. That's what we do as men. We have absolutely no interest in making sure men are capable of protecting and providing for the women and children in their lives. We just have this arbitrary obstacle course that only exists so we can pin little stars on each other and say, hey, you're a man, you ran through the obstacle course.
Yep.
It's so fucking stupid. This entire framework, it's so up its own ass. Okay.
All right,
Shall we
next
continue?
part. So, but these advantages come with a cost. The boundaries protecting group membership are policed more heavily for high status than low status groups. In this sense, manhood relative to womanhood is harder won, easier lost.
Okay. So the boundaries protecting group memberships are policed more heavily for high status than low status groups. They're also policed more heavily for groups that are expected to sacrifice for nothing. Like the boundaries for like slave classes are policed much more heavily. Like the movements of slaves, the identities of slaves are policed much more heavily than that of slave owners. Like this is a very, it's like, oh, we're looking at this thing that sort of resembles this other thing, therefore they're identical. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like harder won. And the other thing is that high status and low status groups, right? If manhood is harder won, okay, so one, it's high status, and easier lost, lower status than women. So if you don't win the status as a man, you don't end up in the status of a woman. You end up in the status of a failed man, which is a man who is not deserving of not only respect, but also any kind of the support and resources of society. So you end up being in a much lower status than women, right? So by their own definition, man as a category incorporates both high status winners and low status losers, lower than women's status losers, by what they're saying right here. And then they're saying that the category man is policed more harshly because it's higher status than the category women. But they're ignoring the fact that usually that's between categories. So what I mean is, say you got the sumptuary laws for royals, right? And what that is, well, there's a lot more than sumptuary laws. There's also the prohibitions against owning weapons. So royal families and aristocratic families could wear certain colors. They could wear certain fabrics that were more expensive and elaborate and beautiful, and they could have weapons, right? And the peasants weren't allowed to have those things. So those were genuine ways of policing the aristocratic identity and making it exclusive to them and excluding peasants. But that's between two groups, right? Okay. So
Yeah.
what they're doing here is they're saying that men police their identity more, right? Because you have the high status men policing that high status identity and saying low status men aren't allowed to have it, even though it's actually a race that all men win, or all men run and some men win. But that's not what's happening with the peasant versus the aristocratic. The aristocrat is preventing the peasant from having access to the identity. In the direct parallel that they're making, or they're trying to make, it would be men policing women to prevent them from having access to the male identity. And that's not what they found. They found that the policing on women is less, and men don't police women. In fact, women are the only ones who really even police women at all, a little bit, at least in terms of the expectation that women be warm and communal, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, but men aren't policing women at all, really, anywhere. So the analogy that they're using, the aristocrat versus peasant policing of identity, doesn't apply here, but they're trying to make it apply inside the identity of men, right? So because men police the identity of man, you have to be useful in order to be a man. They're saying that it is the aristocratic identity. It's identical because aristocrats police their identity against peasants, but men don't police their identity against women. This is so there's no actual, they're trying to make a comparison here that doesn't exist. And they're trying to make, it's a legal term. They're trying to make parts become a whole. They're trying to say, oh, well, aristocratic identities are policed harder. Male identities are policed harder. Therefore, their high status identities relative to women. But the aristocratic policing isn't necessarily within, at least it's not as powerfully within, it's between the two classes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is fundamentally flawed. Hopefully I explained it in a way that people understand. But this is like sophistry right here. And it is in fact completely false. Like you can't make these equivalences. You are trying to take parts of things and make a whole. All right, let's keep going.
All right. Assiduous policing of group boundaries, in turn, functions to protect men's privileged status and justify their advantaged social position. So it functions to protect men's privileged status and justify their advantaged social position. So men use this to keep other men out of, I said, the limelight, or create hierarchies with some men at the top and other men beneath them. And that's
male obstacle course.
That's not something that's earned according to this. This is just something that is used by privilege to justify an advantaged social position. So, well, I don't know. I don't think men have a problem with hierarchies that are fair and just and based in meritocracy. So if a man knows another man is better suited to something, he's most likely to just be like, okay, well, that's okay, right?
There you go.
They compete as a means to test the weaknesses. Like if there is like an opportunity to make a system stronger by putting a better qualified person there, they will compete in those areas. But if they're like, psychologically healthy men that are not antisocial and want to like be a part of some project with other men, they're generally going to like realize, they're going to know their role, as it were, right?
Yeah.
So, but these people who don't see, they see hierarchies as just bad, flat out. That's why they're criticizing this. They're saying, oh, these men are, you're as deserving as any other person to be in this position. But of course, women are even more deserving to be in these positions.
Or maybe they're flat out saying that the male obstacle course is designed to exclude women and men who don't live up, of course. I don't
Yes.
know. It doesn't make any sense. Assiduous policing of group boundaries in turn functions to protect men's privileged status. Yes, they're trying to say men are aristocrats. But the problem is that men aren't actually policing the boundaries of in the way that aristocrats policed it against peasants. Like, really, they aren't. Like, men aren't complaining about trans women or trans men. You notice that? Men aren't complaining about trans men.
No.
No, it's women who are complaining about trans women because they are policing their boundaries. So right there, men are not policing the boundaries against women. In fact, what the hell are gender equal countries? If men really policed the boundaries against women to any degree, feminism would never have occurred to the level that it did. Right? So they don't. Men just don't act like an aristocratic class experiencing an incursion from a peasant class. They just don't. If anything, they're happy to share their space with women who aren't obnoxious and trying to take it over and turn it into something else it isn't. Right? So this is not, there is no actual, and even the results in this find that men don't police the boundaries for women. They don't. So even what they found here doesn't support what they're saying. And yet they're trying to make it support it because men police boundaries intersectionally. That means that men police, or they police expectations on other men. So they're trying to make men policing other men evidence that men are oppressing women. And it doesn't work. Because men police other men in order to make sure that those men are capable of protecting and providing for their women and other vulnerable members of the community. That's why they do it. Of course, they won't acknowledge it in this paper. So they have all of this incoherent, like, sophistry that they're doing. They're trying to make parts be a whole, as they are here. And it's ridiculous. They're trying to say that men's identity is contingent, but it's also male privilege. Even though it's not conferred simply because you're a man, you have to earn it. But earning it doesn't actually create it. That's the other thing. There's no concept that going through the obstacle course makes men better able to go through obstacle courses. This isn't just like you just go through this arduous obstacle course and they're at the end saying, well, the reason why you went through that was just because you're male privileged. No, they just went through an obstacle course. They went through a genuine adverse experience and figured out how to do it and overcome their own, whatever might stop a person from being able to do it. Like, so there's no acknowledgement of any kind of reality that men might be doing this because of reality. Not just because they want to pin stars on each other, but only sometimes. Like, yeah.
Well, even then, like most guys know that that's not even like a good reason. Like they reject the idea of making themselves exposable for the hope that maybe they'll get like their gravestone will have like a certain marking on it or something that shows that they served their country or whatever. Like there's a recognition, and it's like a complete, like these people's perception is completely divorced from that reality.
Yes,
and none of this happens without risk, and that on average men know the risk. I don't know that there are guys just like, yeah, I'm gonna go kill 100 guys and come back with like a kill death ratio of whatever. Like, we're gonna get my Call of Duty score. Like they don't think like that, but these people do. Like this is how you know these people have never had like to make these difficult kinds of choices
or being asked to do anything like this. I probably haven't even been asked to have a job, but like a real job where it's it impacts your health. But like this is it's just something came up when you were talking about this. The more a man has to sacrifice in the service of whatever aim it is, the less, in my experience, the less likely he's going to really appreciate a star. Because usually that means that he's had to watch other men make the ultimate sacrifice. Like the men who seem to be most resistant to being awarded are soldiers. Because reminds them of all the men who failed to come back, or that this is what I'm taking from their own testimony, or survivor's guilt, or they don't feel like they're worthy of it, and yet they've made the most sacrifices, and they've seen men make the most sacrifices, and they tend to be the ones that are least likely to really want to get a gold star. Like, so do these people ever actually, like, they occupy the same space as men, but do they ever actually talk to them? Like, all right, let's try to get through this.
All right. Let's see. Oh shit, I lost my place here. I moved up ahead. I moved ahead, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think you're at noted.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. As noted, people around the world recognize the notion that manhood is a relatively precarious social status. Illustrating this, a 4-item scale of precarious manhood beliefs. Other people often question whether a man is a real man. It is fairly easy for a man to lose his status as a man. Displayed adequate psychometric isomorphism, indicating that scores collected at the individual level reflect a meaningful country-level attribute. And yet, no studies have examined whether people also endorse trait-based gender rules more strongly for men than women. However, some findings from predominantly Western cultures offer indirect evidence of a double standard in broadly defined gender rules. For instance, boys report feeling more external pressure to exhibit gender-typical behaviors and to avoid gender atypical behaviors than girls do.
Women most oppressed.
Yeah. Women free to live however they want, women most affected. Moreover, boys, compared to girls who flout gender rules, encounter more rejection, bullying, and negative evaluations from peers and adults, and more censure and punishment from parents. In adolescence, gender nonconformity is more strongly associated with peer victimization among young men than women. These findings indicate that boys and men versus girls and women face harsher sanctions for violating gender rules, but they do not demonstrate that perceivers themselves necessarily endorse this double standard. After all, It is possible that boys and men who violate gender rules face relatively harsh sanctions because their rule violations are particularly transgressive or disruptive, and not because perceivers and other socializing agents desire or expect more rigid gender rule adherence from them.
Okay. Nowhere is there a sense that the men's gender role is probably a non-negotiable. Because if you can't defend your space where you're trying to construct all of the woke utopia you could possibly eat, if you can't defend it, you don't have it. And just based on evolutionary factors, men are much more prone to occupy positions of defense and much more capable. So there's no sense that maybe that men's gender role is policed, because if men leave their gender role, bad things happen.
Yes.
I mean, if women leave their gender role, bad things also happen.
But they seem to be in a way that is happening.
Yeah, they seem to be so divorced, like you let women leave the gender role and it doesn't immediately cause a complete collapse. So you're like, oh, okay, we're okay. And then 3 generations later, you're all drinking out of puddles and living in yurts again. But that's so it's a little bit divorced from its cause. And so, I mean, yeah, both may be the case, but if men leave their gender role tomorrow, we won't have heating, lighting. We won't have electricity. We won't have sewers. We won't have gas delivery. We won't have a society. Right? So men need to continue to occupy that role, need to be expected not to be weak, or our society fails to continue to work. And the difference between our society is that I guess we're prosperous enough that we can pretend. Like we can still hold men to those standards because we still need them. Please don't bite me. Please stop. Please stop. Ow. Ow. Please let go. Ow. Okay, I'm being attacked. I just have to go limp. Okay, so I will try to continue my thought while I'm being attacked by my cat. Okay, she ceased. All right. So if men don't continue their standard, like men don't continue, then everybody's totally screwed.
Yes.
And and maybe that's why they're policed more. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah. So let me just see if anybody in the chat. By the way, shout out to the chat. Night motorcyclist, tree surgeon, Jim Bottle, Missy Licks or Ilks, How, Tony Palmer, Selectrovert. That's a funny name. Night motorcyclist, Serene Soul. Let's see who else. Fracas Maximus, Jim Bottle. I think I already read yours, but whatever. Not related to Bacon. Not Kevin Bacon. We're all related to Kevin Bacon. Tony Palmer, Murder of Crows, Frank Blaskowitz, Last Independent Thinker, Mabubnur. Okay. Hello to all of y'all. Thank you for joining us. Okay.
Yeah, get those super chats
Next
in, guys.
paragraph.
Badger.com
Yeah, get the super chats in. Contribute to the conversation. Yell at us if you want to. I guess Missy Licks left.
Yeah,
so
the
quitter.
craziness was too much for her.
Yeah, she wasn't. Well, it's you're disrupting your worldview. She did say something about like you should thank feminism of the 1920s, but we're not going to go down the rabbit hole. How about no? How about that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah, let's keep going. I think it's more germane. Yeah, you got it. You got it highlighted.
All right, more germane to the current investigation. One set of studies examined the number and strength of male and female prescriptive and proscriptive gender rules across different age groups and found that gender rules for men were generally more restrictive than gender rules for women. While these findings are consistent with the assumption of a double standard in gender rules, the study lacked a direct comparison of the strength with which perceivers endorsed gender rules for men versus women. Moreover, the samples were limited to U.S. respondents, thereby limiting the generalizability, that's a big one, of the findings. Okay. Yeah, so, well, I don't know. I don't like the wording. I don't know that gender rules are like bad necessarily. I don't think that they're a thing either, though. I don't think that there's a man book out there or a woman book. I think people, when you allow them the freedom to behave however they want, they're going to generally fall into certain patterns that can be observed in nature, whether they are humans or animals. So I'm sorry, but to call it gender roles, we have to shatter them. That all operates under this, I guess, this idea that all things are socialized and taught, and then therefore can be unlearned. And I have to ask, why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately,
I think
you're getting a little sucked into the bullshit. The truth is that this doesn't change anything. We're just giving things to women.
Yeah.
Like we always have. And we're giving things to women at the expense of men, like we always have.
Yep.
There's no change here, except now we're teaching men an extremely toxic way of viewing themselves that's destroying them. And also our society, ultimately, because we have less healthy men to rely on to actually do the things that men need to do. All right, let's keep going.
Contents of gender prescriptions and proscriptions. The current study fills a gap in our knowledge by directly comparing the strength with which college-age educated perceivers in 62 countries endorse trait-based gender prescriptions, agency for men versus communion for women, and proscriptions, weakness for men versus dominance for women. Note that gender prescriptions and proscriptions are not mirror images, but instead reflect distinct dimensions of evaluation. Prescriptions, i.e., agency and communion, reflect two broad dimensions underlying many social evaluations, whereas agency includes traits signifying independence and mastery, communion includes traits signifying connectedness and warmth. Mapping these dimensions onto binary gender, men are prescribed agentic qualities such as leadership, ambition, and competitiveness, and women are prescribed communal qualities such as helpfulness, nurturance, and sensitivity to others.
How come women never really show those qualities?
Yeah. Well, this whole thing, there's like a bunch of bullshit baked into these, I guess you could say these
Well,
categories
maybe
that
they
they're creating.
do. Maybe they do in a sort of a shallow sense. I don't know.
Well,
Maybe I'm being too harsh.
I think it's possible, but I don't think it's encouraged in women. Like at my church, I see it. Like I see the women there. They plan meals together. They bring food. They look out for they're like scheduling each other's baby showers and like weddings, and they're helping out. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. They look out for each other. That whatever. But I don't think that's modern women are like that. No, I don't think they're encouraged. I think actually when they talk about it's basically just like operating in the space of the social. Okay, so like obviously men do that too, but women, it's where they excel. It's like why I say social media is Call of Duty for women, because it can become like a battlefield, and I think that it often is, because I think it's the way that women are there is no encouragement to be all these good qualities that they talk about, like connected and warm to other people in their community. So instead they're just like hostile and competitive, and they try to engage in mate suppression and mate suppressive behavior on other women online. And so I think it's just what gets encouraged and what is promoted, and also what's rewarded. So they act on what rewards them, and I think that does. Did you hear about this thing that happened on Grok, Allison? This viral trend on Grok. Do you know about this bikini trend? Do you know what the bikini? The bikini trend. So like on X, I don't know how it started, but a woman posted her, like a picture of herself at like a outdoor gathering, and she was wearing like a low cut shirt. And somebody, we don't know if it was male or female, but somebody basically replied and said, Grok, can you put her in a bikini? And Grok put her in a bikini, and she got all up in arms. She was like, how is this legal? Somebody should be able to do something about it. Of course, it's an AI image. I mean, it's Grok, so it's a pretty solid, it looks just like her, but it's just like a different body. And she's like losing her mind, right? And of course, because of that, a bunch of feminists came out, and they were all talking about how something needs to be done. We need systemic change. This is rape culture, all these other things. And I noticed, because I would go on X every so often, and what I noticed was really interesting is that a slew of women were all posting their images, and they were saying, Grok, I hope nobody puts a bikini on this one, and it's like a picture of herself with like her legs spread or her like ass out. And of course, because it's the internet, people were like responding, and they were doing that. And some of it was humorous. They weren't all just doing bikinis. Some of them were like, make her into Shrek, or put a burqa on her. And and of course, Grok would oblige almost anything. But what I noticed is that when the women were going on there and doing it, then other women would go into their comments and reply to them, and they would engage. They would like, tear them down. They were like, well, my picture's going to look better than your picture. Like, and they would go, it was like the stepsisters from Cinderella. And I just watched this. I thought it was really fascinating because, obviously there were some men in there like having fun, and there was a lot of trolling going on, but it was like where it got kind of serious was when other women were getting AI generated bikinis to respond to women who had AI generated bikinis. So it's like this big thing going on. Putting Grok put Grok in a bikini. You should look that up. It's funny. It's funny. There's a lot of it out there. The internet's full and of course, there's like, most of the conversation is just women saying there's women that are for it because they're using it to sell their OnlyFans or like promote their profile or get views on their posts or send people to their Instagram, whatever, right? And then there are women who are just like trying to get everything censored, and they're, totally against it. And then you have like some thirsty dudes that are having fun. and you got trolls that are like putting women in burqas. Or I remember one chick, I thought it was really funny. She I think she was like an OnlyFans girl or whatever, but she like put some pictures of herself out there and was basically getting people to put her in bikinis and like scotch tape and stuff. But then one guy said, "Can you put some clothes on her and put her with a father?" And then there was a picture of her with like a dad. I was like, "Oh man, that's the best." I thought that was great. But anyway, I said that because like this whole thing about like what they're calling, they're sort of like already framing it like in a way that I think is, like kind of like showing their bias, right? Where they're basically like, here are some qualities that women have that are positive. Here are some qualities that men have that are expected. So they because like women's warmth and communion, and their helpfulness and nurturance are probably like, they wouldn't see those as bad traits, but they would see agency and independence and competitiveness as bad. Because the thing is that in a positive environment, men are more likely to be cooperative than competitive because they're building something together. But this is the way they're framing it. I don't know if you guys see what I'm saying, but it's already framed poorly. So everything that comes after the base assumptions, I think, are gonna they're gonna affect the results probably in a way that these people want, which is why they're doing it this way. So
Okay, so let's go to the next
all
paragraph.
right. In contrast, prescriptions of weakness for men and dominance for women map onto a third dimension called potency or dominance. That is distinct from agency and communion. Potency includes traits such as strength versus weakness and heavy-handedness versus gentleness that convey how much control and influence a person can exert. Although potency correlates positively with agency and negatively with communion, it captures a specific subset of traits with relevance for gender prescriptions. Men are proscribed low potency traits such as weakness and naivete, and women are proscribed high potency traits such as dominance and arrogance. According to the status incongruity hypothesis, this is because potency traits directly implicate status. Thus, men ought not display weakness and women ought not display dominance because such traits are incongruous with men's and women's placement within the gender hierarchy. So the theory is, what they're assuming is that women who behave dominant are seen negatively because they are like basically not operating within the gender hierarchy, which is that women are beneath men, according to these people. And that when men act weak, then they're also not operating in their correct position. They should be dominant over women. So they're not saying this as an ought, though. They're saying this as, this is like they're trying to, I think, frame the thing they're criticizing. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, let's finish this off because I want to get to the discussion.
All right.
There's only a little bit left. Yeah.
Here we apply a precarious manhood lens to the literature on trait-based gender prescriptions and proscriptions by testing whether people endorse a double standard in gender rules. We expect people to report that agency is more desirable for men than community is for women, and that weakness is less desirable for men than dominance is for women.
Okay, let's go to the discussion. Do the scrolling music. Doodle-oo, doodle-oo, doodle-oo. Look at all of this. Okay. All right. Look at all of that. All right.
Here.
There we go. Discussion. Yeah.
All right. We sought evidence of a double standard in trait-based gender rules, stronger endorsement of prescriptive and proscriptive rules for men and women among college undergraduates in 62 countries, and tested whether this double standard is larger in less gender equal countries. Findings generally supported the hypotheses, with some exceptions, focusing first on...
Okay, I just want to point out again, when you have an aristocratic versus and I'm using that as an example of a high status versus low status, the high status polices the norms that signal high status. The low status might want to adopt those norms, but doesn't. They're trying to propose that men occupy the position of aristocracy, policing their high status but in order for that analogy to hold, they would have to be policing women, not men. Like aristocrats, they may backbite, but they don't stop other aristocrats from wearing aristocratic colors and aristocratic jewelry and having aristocratic weapons and going to aristocratic events and marrying other aristocrats. You see what I'm saying? They don't stop aristocrats from doing those things. In fact, they encourage it because they're part of a class, and those are the class markers of their status. So they would encourage other aristocrats to engage in the class markers of being an aristocrat, but they would discourage peasants from doing so, right? They're trying to say that men are an aristocratic class. They're a high status class that is discouraging, like that is policing its class, like its class markers, right? But they're not policing the class. They're not saying women can't have these class markers at all, right? They're not. So they're not actually doing what aristocrats do when they police their high status class markers. They're in fact policing other aristocrats from being seen as aristocratic. If that makes sense. So it's incoherent. Throughout history, aristocrats may have policed the boundaries of aristocrat, but if you were an aristocrat, if you were part and you were recognized as part of that group, you were expected and you were encouraged and you weren't prevented from showing the markers of your group, right? You weren't prevented from showing the status of your group. You prevented peasants from doing that. So they're trying to pretend that that model holds for men and women, and they're trying to they're doing a little sleight of hand, you know, like the cups. They're hiding, you know, they're like, oh, you didn't see that, did you? They're trying to pretend that men policing each other is the same as aristocrats policing peasants, and it doesn't work because they are not. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay, focusing first on gender prescriptions, college students overall rated agency as more desirable for men than communion is for women. But this double standard was not evident universally. In only 58% of countries in our sample was men's agency rated as more desirable than women's communion. However, the magnitude of double standards in prescriptions correlated with country-level gender equality, GGGI, as predicted, such that people in less gender equal countries want men to be competent, determined, and independent more strongly than they want women to be compassionate, understanding, and warm. So they're holding men to higher standards in these countries.
Yeah, so you see how this is nothing, like they're trying to make this as men are high status, women are low status, and this all maps to because men police their status amongst themselves. That means that they're identical to aristocrats policing their status against, you know, preventing peasants from adopting their status. That's what they're trying to do, and yet it fails. And so they're trying to assert something that the evidence doesn't show. Again, right? You cannot say that men as a whole occupy a higher status if the point is that men have to show that they deserve that status. Aristocrats don't have to prove, you know, they have to prove their bloodlines, sure, but they don't have to prove other things to occupy their status, right? And it's not, the policing isn't top down with aristocrats. I mean, to a degree, it's like there's social things happening. It's class between groups. It's towards peasants. Anyway, so they're trying to say that men's policing of each other is equivalent to aristocrats' policings of peasants, and it doesn't work. Okay.
No, I hear you. They're trying to apply, they're trying to take sex differences and turn them into class differences by essentially only looking at like the most successful men or the highest status men and comparing them to everybody else, I guess. Albatross gave us a super chow for 5. Didn't say anything. I don't know if you meant to say something else. But
Maybe.
yeah, if you did,
Let me
just
just
tag
double check.
Badger Live Streams in a comment. But I got 5 from him. So Carl Hines says hi. Hi, Carl Hines. Welcome to the stream. Okay, should do that on the verticals, because in the vertical, when you come across them, you have to hit a button to join the live. So you see it in your feed, then you hit a button to join, and then when you do, I think it says hi in there so that the person watching can see. So hello, Carl Hines. I just like the glasses, he says. So there you go, Allison. He likes your
Thank
glasses.
you. Somebody actually likes them. That's great. Most of the time you say I look like an idiot or something.
Yeah.
Or
It's just play cyberpunk music over it, and it's, you know.
yeah.
No,
No, it looks
anyway.
like there's no comment for Albatross, but if you did intend to send a comment, then just send it through
Send it through the
chat.
YouTube or Rumble, and I'll be on the lookout for it.
All right, next.
All right.
Let's keep
Moreover,
going.
women compared to men showed smaller double standards in prescriptions in more gender equal countries. Turning next to gender proscriptions, we found evidence of a near universal double standard. In 95% of countries studied, college students rated men's weakness as less desirable than women's dominance. However, findings did not support the hypothesis that double standards in proscriptions would correlate with GGGI. We also found no evidence that participant binary gender interacts with GGGI to predict double standards in proscriptions. Thus, college undergraduates almost universally want men to avoid weakness, fearfulness, and uncertainty more strongly than they want women to avoid dominance, arrogance, and aggressiveness.
Yeah. And what they've actually found, this is the strongest finding, but of course they don't report on that. They don't report on the strongest finding, which is across the world. People really don't want men to show weakness. Like, that's the strongest finding of this. And the difference between so-called gender neutral and gender egalitarian and other cultures is that gender egalitarian cultures don't recognize that men are stronger than women. So they still demand that men be stronger than women, or they still condemn men for being weak, but they don't recognize that that results in men being stronger. So it's less gender equality because no one is allowing men to be vulnerable. Nobody's talking about men's issues except us, right? They're all holding men to an expectation that they be strong, that they not have needs, not be fearful, and not be uncertain, right? We all hold them to these standards, but the difference is in the gender delulu countries, we don't recognize that holding men to higher standards mean men are being held to higher standards, and thus probably are living, would assume be living up to them. So we expect men not to be weak. We allow women to be weak, but we do not acknowledge that that makes men strong or stronger, because we are delulu countries. But non-delulu countries do. They do acknowledge the effects of this. That's the difference. That's the difference that they found, and they are trying to plug into their framework. And because we can't recognize the harms that men face, the harms that men endure to be recognized as strong, they're seeing this all as privilege. So they're terming the double standard that in the non-delulu countries that recognize that if you hold men to a standard of strength, that means that men are stronger than women. Like that you want men to be stronger than women, and then you're like, oh yes, men are stronger than women, even though those males who fail to be stronger are sort of washout. We don't talk about them, right? But they still recognize that if men live up to a standard of greater strength than women, that means they're stronger than women. They recognize that reality. They are capable of recognizing it, right? That is a privilege that men have. So in these cultures where men have to play the man-killing game, the deadly race, they have to run the deadly race, and then they win. And those cultures that are like, hey, you ran the deadly race. You are a man. As a man, you occupy a position of greater respect for your strength because you ran the deadly man race, right? Those cultures, that's men's privilege to be recognized, right? And then they say that's why men put the pressure on other men not to be weak. And yet, right here, we see a massive problem, a massive hole in that, because the gender delulu cultures, the gender equal cultures, they're nothing of the sort. They're only gender equal because we don't look at men's situation. Those cultures still expect men to run the deadly man race, but at the end, they get a punch in the face and being told that they're privileged if they win. But that's the reason why we force men to run the deadly man race, is because at the end they get to be in the winners. Well, what's the reason why we get men to run the deadly man race in cultures where there is no winner's circle for them? What's their reason? What's our reason for doing it? Like, if that's the reason why men enforce these norms on other men, see, that's their logic, right? This is what they presented at the beginning. Men force these norms, the norm of running the deadly man race on other men, because they get the benefit of putting gold stars on each other at the end, right? Right? But that benefit doesn't exist in like half the countries that they surveyed. So why are men forcing other men to run the deadly man race when there's no putting gold stars on each other at the end?
Yeah.
No answer. No, not even.
Well, they're hoping you don't look at it.
Quietly walking out. Did you see? No, okay. I don't think they're looking. I'm going to quietly walk out.
What's going on?
I'm just quietly walking out so I don't get questioned on the gigantic hole in my feminist confabulation. Don't worry about it. I'm just doing a physical demonstration of quietly evading the question, Brian.
Yeah.
It's just more chaos with me and the void cat. All right, just like quietly walking out. Don't ask that. Don't ask. Oh no. Oh geez, that's a giant hole, isn't it? Well, okay. Male privilege. Run off.
Must be.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going.
Well, that was that page. Okay.
Yeah.
Our findings also replicated and extended past studies on gender prescriptions and proscriptions in two important ways. First, we found near universal evidence for agency and communion as gender prescriptions for men and women, respectively, and weakness and dominance as gender proscriptions, respectively. Second, we established the measurement invariance of 4 brief scales for measuring gender prescription and proscriptions. Thus, these scales can be used by cross-cultural and gender researchers to draw meaningful comparisons across countries and world regions, a practical contribution of this research. That double standards in trait prescriptions are larger in less, or that double standards in trait prescriptions are larger in less gender equal countries is consistent with the logic that men's agentic traits are especially desirable in places where they face stronger pressures to fill traditional protector-provider roles.
I wonder why. They face stronger pressures. Now, the argument that they're making is that they just arbitrarily face stronger pressures. They're just, for whatever reason, men in these cultures are just like, yeah, the deadly man race is just really important to us.
Yeah.
It just so happens that these cultures correspond with cultures with high degrees of conflict over resources. So they haven't secured, they may be very resource rich, but they haven't really secured the infrastructure to exploit them to the same level that our cultures have. They tend to be less prosperous. There's a lot more conflict over resources. You know, they're emerging economies, that kind of thing. I wonder why there's a greater emphasis on provider and protector, on men occupying the role of provider and protector in those cultures. But here's the other caveat, right? Actually, I will get to the caveat because we're about to, I mean, they don't recognize any kind of external factor to this. Everything is always arbitrary. It's arbitrary that men force other men to run the deadly man race.
Yeah.
It's just completely arbitrary. And it's only because they want to put gold stars on each other afterwards. Hold a gold star party, maybe some glitter, you know. Like this is infantile thinking on the part of these researchers. A complete lack of actual, is there any kind of physical circumstance that might make these cultures emphasize protection and provision in men more? No, we can't look at that. Okay,
Yeah.
keep going.
Albatross sent a comment to go with his super chow from earlier. He says, my comment was, quote, did this article just admit that women are privileged because there's less pressure on them to stick to traditional trappings, end quote? Yes. And now like, this is just the normal feminist way of like, okay, I'm going to accept all of these things as true, but behold, as I weave nothing up my sleeve here, nothing up my sleeve here, watch me turn this into something that actually victimizes women or at least blames men, you know, so that we can still go after patriarchy. So,
yeah. Yeah, just keep going.
That double standards in trait prescriptions are larger in less gender equal countries is consistent with the logic that men's agentic traits are especially desirable in places where they face stronger pressures to fill traditional protector-provider roles. Endorsing especially strong prescriptions for men in more patriarchal contexts presumably assists in socialization by preparing boys to compete for leadership positions, embrace challenges, and fulfill physically risky roles. As Gilmore notes, the roles expected of men in more traditional cultures are often more acutely dangerous and risky, like hunting, warfare, or physical labor, than those expected of women, which is infant caregiving, domestic tasks, emotional labor. Emotional labor? No.
No, they don't. Not in
No.
traditional cultures. That's not a thing.
You're just making shit up. And men's successes in such roles is less assured than women's success. What?
Okay, they're only going to cotton men who can live up to a higher standard of provision and protection. Any man who washes out of society and goes to die in a ditch and get killed in a conflict or whatever, right? That's what's happening here. And they're saying that the implication is that this isn't a result of dealing with external pressures. It's just something patriarchy did for shits and giggles. Because if you recognize that this is a result of dealing with external pressures, you have to recognize that what they're doing is they're making boys live up to or gain the tools necessary to deal with those external pressures, win the resources, win the protection for their social group, right? And if the boys can't do it, they're gone. They're excluded, right? And how, if you actually recognize all of those factors, how can you argue that women are oppressed by that? When women are the beneficiaries of it without having to actually run the deadly man race. And then that is the reality that they are tap dancing around. Which is why they can't recognize the externals. They can't recognize the external things these men and boys are dealing with in these cultures, nor can they recognize who is benefited by these men and boys dealing with them, nor can they recognize that if men and boys manifestly demonstrate that they can't deal with them, they're removed. They're disposable to society, right? They can't contend with any of this. So they just tap dance around it, try to hope that nobody goes in there and starts connecting the dots in all of this. And then they continue to assert that somehow the motive for doing all of this isn't protecting and providing for your social group, isn't proving yourself worthy of being part of that social group as a boy or a man. It's because at the end of the day, all of these men just sort of arbitrarily did this so they can pin gold stars on each other. And because anything else means you have to reckon with the truth, the reality.
Yep.
Which is it's the pinning gold stars on each other is not why men create the deadly man race. The respect is not why men create the deadly man race. The glory is not why men create the deadly man race.
It's almost like these people don't know like how we have the advanced civilization we have.
Well, they do. They do.
No, I know they're not obviously they're lying, but I'm just
they're
saying like they're
remembering.
pretending like no one else.
Yeah, they're pretending it
Like
doesn't
it
exist.
all just it was
Just
just here when we
paid.
showed up.
Oh no. It was stolen from women, Brian.
It was stolen from women. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, even
makes
though
even
men
better sense.
today make most of the major sacrifices to keep everything running, in the past, men somehow stole it from women. They prevented women from making it themselves. That's how they stole it from them.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, like, when you lay it out, it makes no sense because it doesn't. Okay, let's finish this off.
Moreover, men's intergroup competition for status and resources is especially fierce in more patriarchal contexts, whereas women's outcomes in terms of survival and reproduction have been less variable than men's throughout evolutionary history.
Okay,
Thus,
let's put
Hmm?
these two concepts together. Men's intragroup competition for status and resources is especially fierce. Okay? That means that men win, right? And they gain the status and resources. So if you have a very conflict-orientated region, then they do it through military. If you have a less conflict, then they do it through organizing centralized resources, whatever. However they do that. You businessman versus warrior model, right? So men take the risks to gain the resources, and the outcome just happens to be that more women survive comfortably. And they're not making the connection between these two things. Men taking the risks, acquiring the resource, and the outcomes being, they say, less variable. But what they mean is more women survive. More women are comfortable. More women reproduce. So they don't make the connection between the sacrifices men are making and the comfort and security that women get. You notice that?
Mm-hmm.
It's all status
No, it's all
games.
divorced. It's all isolated.
It's all status games,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is how they manage to say that men pinning gold stars on each other at the end is the privilege that makes them run the deadly man race. That's why they're doing it, you see. They're maintaining the gold star pinning privilege, even at the expense of other men's lives. Okay, let's keep going.
Thus, larger double standards and trade prescriptions in more patriarchal contexts perhaps reflect the additional social pressure required to push men into grueling, high risk, and competitive activities and occupations. Larger double standards in more patriarchal contexts reflects, well, they say perhaps, they're trying to give themselves an out here. The additional social pressure. What if like men do the grueling, high risk, and competitive activities and occupations, specifically occupations, because no one else is going to do it, and it has to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what these societies that are more patriarchal, are these like not first world countries, or
Yes.
like how are they? So they're like second and third world countries.
Yeah.
So but basically, where survival is like at the like higher up on the list of things that need to get done. Okay.
But still, they're like first world countries still expect men not to be weak.
Of course. Yeah.
They just don't recognize that the result of expecting men not to be weak and allowing women to be weak is that men are stronger. They just won't recognize that. That's the point.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
All right. Moreover, as noted, the links between gender equality and double standards in prescriptions were moderated by participant binary gender. Specifically, college women in more gender equal contexts hold men and women to similar prescriptive rules, whereas college men in such contexts find men's agency more desirable than women's communion. This pattern fits with other findings obtained largely in Western, more egalitarian. Huh?
They say that really strangely. It just means that they police women. They they don't think that women necessarily need to be, it's not as important that they be communal, that they don't police women as hard. It's basically what they're saying.
Yes.
And they try to
Yeah.
say
Well,
it.
they can't.
They can't
Not
say it
modern
like
women.
that. So they say things like, oh, men being in this way is more desirable than women being in that way. Well, what that means is, it means that women are not expected, or they aren't necessarily rewarded for occupying a traditional gender role to the same degree, which means that particular gender role isn't as incentivized, which means it's not as policed. It's neither as policed either way. Okay, keep going.
All right. This pattern fits with other findings obtained largely in Western, more egalitarian contexts, indicating that men are especially harsh critics of other men's gender nonconformity. Mirroring these findings, perhaps men in more general or gender equal countries are also especially enthusiastic endorsers of other men's conformity to agentic prescriptions. Such a pattern might reflect a defensive response to increasing gender equality, as members of the dominant gender group, men, relative to women in more gender equal contexts, may desire greater gender conformity from other men as a way of reinforcing in-group/out-group boundaries. So now they're trying to claim that men are the ones policing other men?
Yeah, but do you see what they just did? Yeah, men are the ones policing other men. They've complained this from the beginning.
Yeah.
Brian. But what they just did right there was they said that in-group, out-group, right? So they're trying to say that men police, like it's the aristocratic versus peasant thing again. They're trying to say that because men police their own more, that means they feel like they are higher status, right? Like the aristocrats. The aristocrats didn't police their own more than the peasants, at least not the markers of their class. And men don't police women like aristocrats police peasants. They police each other, and they're trying to say, well, they're trying to use the word policing, right? They're trying to just say, well, aristocrats police, therefore men police, other men. Aristocrats police peasants, therefore men police other men. Therefore, the policing means that they occupy a high status group. No.
Yes. Right.
Peasants probably policed each other a lot more on working and being stoic and doing your job.
Yeah.
Right? And aristocrats policed peasants a lot more on looking like an aristocrat. Okay, let's keep going.
Well, what if okay, so they're framing it one way where they're saying like men are especially harsh critics of other men's gender nonconformity. But what if that isn't because those men are trying to hurt those other men, or they're trying to enforce some kind of strict gender conformity on other men? What if they're looking out for them in a way? Like the way that men look out for each other? Because I'm sorry, but I don't think that anyone is a harsher critic or judge of a man's masculinity than women are. Women are the harshest judges, and you see it everywhere, all the time. So what if men are aware of that and they're trying to help other men by saying, hey man, you're going to get bullied or whatever. So they approach it in a way that is not in the same way that a woman might give that advice, but they are looking out for them. It's like the bright side of bullying in a way. Like, what if the purpose of it is to sort of help those men, to protect them in the future, right? And also, if you're in a group activity, you're working with other men, it's military or it's hunting or it's some kind of project that's going to involve a lot of hard work, some risk. You want to make sure that the men that you're with are going to be there for you, right? So there's going to be some, say, testing that's going to happen. And I don't think that because I guess what they're trying to put a value on it, and I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad. And I think I'd rather get it from men than women anyways.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that's happening. First of all, men are policing other men towards a goal, right?
Yeah.
Generally. And we need men to do that because we need as a society, we need those goals met.
What does leadership
Right?
look like? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and also you will say to young men, if you want a particular outcome, you have to do the work. That's another form of policing. But there are other forms of policing that are absolutely vital, like men policing criminal men and also criminal women. Men do that, right? So this entire paper is presenting policing as a negative thing when it's not. And the other thing it's doing, which is very sly, is it's actually not. First of all, women do police each other in this paper, but it's presenting that as being an expression of virtue, like it's gender equality. These women are gender equal, and because men police other men more, that makes them patriarchal and something, right? But the thing is that they aren't really looking at where women police each other most, which is around resources and resource allocation and access to resources and social standing. Like, I would honestly say that this is completely, like, this doesn't capture at all how women police other women. If you want to see how women police other women, you need to go on Twitter, or you need to be someone like me who gets constantly called a pick me because I'm challenging the current current extraction regime for women in terms of resources, in terms of men's resources, right? And I'm challenging the fairness of it and also the longevity of it, because I don't think that telling men not to be weak, but then not acknowledging that makes them stronger is a functional thing long term. Like, I think it's a horrible thing to do to men. But I can't, I constantly get hit with women's policing. Women don't police other women when it comes to achieving goals. They don't police other women when it comes to being criminal. They police other women when they think that those women are a threat to their access to resources or competition, right? So this paper doesn't capture that at all. So it can't even really say that women don't, or women equally police men and women, because it doesn't capture how women police women. It just captures how men police men, and then says, well, look at this, men police men more. Oh, that's how are they framing this as bad? Oh yeah, that's evidence that women have it worse somehow.
Yep.
It's like you get sucked into these mental traps, and it's like, how did they get you there? How did I find myself in this place? Okay, let's keep going.
As members of the dominant gender group, men relative to women in more gender equal contexts may desire greater gender conformity from other men as a way of reinforcing in-group, out-group boundaries.
Oh, that's how. Because they're trying to allege that men's policing of men indicates that they're in a higher status group and women are lower status than men.
Yes.
And that's why it's patriarchal privilege.
Yeah.
That's how we got here. Okay.
All right. However, this explanation cannot illuminate why participant gender failed to interact with gender equality to predict double standards in gender proscriptions. This question must thus await further investigation.
Yeah, what they mean is that they found the exact opposite of what they expected.
Yeah.
And they found the exact opposite of what they expected. And this is really critical. Listen to me. They found the exact opposite of what they expected along the vector that applies more actual social force, right? So if you have a society in which men are shamed for being weak, for having uncertainties, for expressing fear, that is the access of social pressure. Okay. Not being like, oh yeah, I think men should be strong. That doesn't apply the same pressure as shame, humiliation, ostracization, and toxic abuse when a man expresses any fear or uncertainty or doubt. Okay. It's very different amounts of social pressure. So the most powerful vector of social pressure, everybody does it to men. Women do it to men. Men do it to men. Western cultures do it to men. Global South cultures do it to men. Everybody does it. Everybody applies this pressure to men. That's what they found. And that is not accounted for in any of their theories. That's not what they were looking for. What they were looking for was a clean sweep of the board. Oh, look, gender equal cultures. Everybody's free to do what they want. No, men are still expected to occupy their traditional gender role without the respect of recognizing they're doing so. That's the difference. That's what they found. All right, I don't know if we need to go much further in this, because I can actually, I'm going to read this. This is some of my analysis that I did beforehand. Okay, so this is what I asked Perplexity. How the fuck do men navigate? It's extremely bad for men to be weak when it's not desirable. It's not desirable for men to be competent, confident, independent, determined, or courageous. This is the framework that we've presented in this. This is what we found. In Western cultures, men are told it is extremely bad to be weak. You are a piece of shit if you're weak. You are a non-man if you're weak. You can just walk out the door, keep going, and die in a ditch if you're weak. Men are shamed for being weak, for being afraid, for having uncertainties, for having any issues. They're constantly shamed for that. Now, but in the same cultures, they say it is not desirable for men to be competent, confident, independent, determined, or courageous. So men can't be weak, but they also can't be competent, confident, independent, determined, or courageous. And they certainly can't be recognized as such. So how the fuck do men navigate that? That's the question I posed to Perplexity. And this is how Perplexity answered. Men are being handed a double bind. Never be weak, and increasingly don't act like a strong man either. Right? So you can't be weak, but you cannot act strong. The study shows that across 62 countries, people almost universally judge male weakness, fearful, dependent, insecure, as much less acceptable than female dominance. So we're not even talking about female weakness. Women have an automatic pass to be weak, which is a problem. They shouldn't. But we are comparing male weakness to female dominance. It is far more acceptable in all of the cultures studied. That is the global South cultures, the emerging economies, for a woman to be a boss babe than it is for a man to be weak. Wrap your mind around that. But in the most gender equal countries, agency in men, competent, confident, independent, determined, courageous, is not rated as more desirable than communion in women. And in several such countries, agency is actually less desired in men. Less desired. So if you look like you're competent, confident, independent, determined, and courageous, if you look that way, you're a privileged fuck. You're a privileged piece of shit. But if you express any weakness, fearfulness, dependency, or insecurity, you're a useless, shameful schmuck. So the implicit message becomes, you absolutely can't be weak or you will be punished and discarded. But we're also uncomfortable explicitly valuing masculine strength, competence, or leadership in you. So you have to watch this little tightrope, right? You can't ever be weak, but you also can't be strong, right? You have to somehow be not fearful, but not courageous. You have to be not incompetent, but not competent. You have to be not strong, but not weak. You have to not be unsure, but you can't know things. That's what the Western world is telling men. You're also uncomfortable with explicitly valuing masculine strength, competence, or leadership in you. There's no stable way to navigate that. It is structured to generate guilt and anxiety no matter what men do. The only sane response is to reject the frame. Treat toughness and competence as intrinsically good from you when used for good ends, and stop letting a hostile culture define your virtues as suspect while still demanding the benefits. This is perplexity.
Wow.
These AIs, they can actually have insights if you frame it in the right way, right? And yes, this is perplexity is taking it off of my questions about this document and also my approach to things. But if that was completely incorrect, it would also say so. And honestly, it is correct. We don't even have to ask. We don't even need perplexity's stamp of approval. That is 100% true. If you are in a position where you are expected to not be weak, but don't be strong, not be confused, but don't know things, right? Not be fearful, but don't be courageous. Not be uncertain, but don't mansplain, right? Where is the place to stand? Right? Where is it? That's what Western cultures are doing to men, giving them absolutely no place to stand, giving them contradictory. And this freaking feminist paper found that out. It found that out. And then somehow it turned that into, well, men police men more. And what's actually happening is that men in certain countries where it's really critical that men not be collapsing mentally because they're needed to protect and provide in a much more immediate way still. It's not that men are not needed in our cultures. They 100% are. But we have all of these government structures that extract all of the benefit from those hard men that are needed and give it to the women who need it. We have all those lovely government bureaucracies to do that. They don't have it in all those lovely government bureaucracies in these emerging countries, which probably is like the functional difference. They don't have a giant complex bureaucracy that's extracting use out of men who are expected not to be weak and giving it to the needs of women. They don't have that. So women need to actually, men need to have these traits on an individual level, and they need to be recognized or they don't engage in it. They can't, there's no extraction mechanism there, right? And also they need these men sane. Like our culture, I guess we don't need sane men. We can just beat the shit out of them mentally and just hope for the best. Bold strategy. I wonder if it'll play out for us. But yeah, so they need sane men in these cultures because they're at the razor's edge of survival. They can't afford a whole bunch of guys who can't pull their weight. They can't afford this kind of very expensive messaging towards men. They can't afford it. So they don't do it. They say, yeah, you got to be stronger and we're going to recognize that you're stronger. As opposed to our system. I don't even think we can call it a system. It's just a series of parasitic loops. Looks very complex. Just like I'm sure a tapeworm looks very complex on an X-ray, but it really is just a simple thing. The only complexity is that it's inside a more complex organism. That's basically our society. It's a series of parasitic loops. But yeah. So how are men supposed to deal with this? All right. I have some thoughts on, and I mean, you guys can read this paper. I'm sure Brian linked it in the low bar. You can read it. And
are you talking about the perplexity or the original article?
The original article.
Yeah. No, it's in there. It's in the description.
Maybe Missy will come back and read that article and she'll come back with an actual argument.
I have doubts.
Yeah. Or this new person, Jill. I think it's Jill. Maybe this individual will come back with will read the paper as we have done and come back with an actual argument. No, they won't. Because get this, the people who wrote this paper are probably the smartest feminists in the room. I said feminists, not the smartest people in the room, the smartest feminists in the room. And the random commentators in our special channel are not even as smart as these people. And all of these people can do is a sophist shuck and jive when the data does not fit their framework. It just doesn't. All right, let me go into the let me bring up my final summations.
Okay.
What the paper actually shows. Manhood is described as earned and fragile, a social status that is hard to win, easy to lose, and must be proved repeatedly by action. Real men are made, not born. This is not a sex-based birthright. It is a precarious achievement role. Right? So men get a ticket into a precarious achievement role. They get a ticket to the deadly man race. Men are held to a stricter, more punitive rules. Rules for boys and men are stricter than rules for girls and women. Boys and men who violate rules face more rejection, bullying, and navigate negative evaluations and more censure and punishment from parents. And these are just these rules. What about the rules around domestic violence and sexual coercion, which just don't apply to women, apparently? Right? What about the rules around criminality, which apparently only apply to boys but not girls? What about the rules about sharing? Again, apparently apply to boys and not girls. And if you are going to apply all of these things asymmetrically, how can you complain that maybe men should be allowed to see themselves as stronger if they have to constantly demonstrate greater strength than women and girls? Boys and men who violate rules, okay. Men are put through a harsher behavioral filter than women. The core pattern, no weakness for men everywhere. Prescriptions, agency for men, competent, confident, independent, determined, courageous, communion for women, compassionate, warm, supportive, devoted. Proscriptions, weakness for men, weak, timid, fearful, dependent, insecure, dominance for women, bossy, dominant, arrogant. Across 62 countries, prescriptions vary, but proscriptions appear universal. Weakness is more strongly forbidden for men than for women in 59 of 52 countries. The size of this proscription double standard does not shrink in countries rated more equal by the Global Gender Gap Index. The one stable rule is men absolutely cannot be weak, even in the most gender equal societies. Remember I talked about at length in the last episode how women still, they don't let, men are still expected to occupy their traditional gender role?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who polices whom? In more gender equal countries, college women hold men and women to similar prescriptive rules. College men still rate agency as more desirable in men than communion in women. So men in college are actually recognizing that the results of holding men to a higher standard of strength means that men tend to be stronger. So that's a good thing for men to be. Whereas that's wrong, right? According to this framework, we have to hold men to a higher standard of strength. But if we say that it's good for men to be strong, no, that's not right. The size of this prescriptive double standard does not, okay. For prescriptions, both sexes almost universally want men to avoid weakness, more strongly than they want women to avoid dominance, with no robust participant gender interaction. Men slightly outpace women in endorsing male agency in high global gender gap index countries, but everyone polices male weakness more than female dominance. This was the primary finding. How the authors spin this is a cost of male privilege. This is the tap dance. They assert the stricter rules for men reflect the higher social status that men versus women enjoy. Not men that fail to earn it, though. So, like I said, they're trying to make the idea that aristocrats police the expression of their class mean that men have a higher standard. But aristocrats police the expression of their class not among other aristocrats, but among peasants, which is the outgroup. And men do not police the expressions of their class among women. So this is fundamentally flawed. Okay. Mm-hmm. They write that membership in the higher status gender group gives men respect and influence, but these advantages come with a cost. Yes, earning them. Stricter boundary policing, making manhood harder won, easier loss, assiduous policing, functions to protect men's privileged status and justify their advantaged social position, but not against women, against other men. So it's not, in plain language, they look at a system that gang presses men into higher stakes tournament. You can't be weak or you'll be severely punished, and reinterpret the selection process as the maintenance cost of pre-existing male privilege, not as the mechanism that produces men's status and competencies at all. Like, so they're just saying that the deadly man race is useless. Right? We don't need to do it. We don't need to run it. We don't need the competencies that result in it. In fact, there are no competencies result. There's nothing good that comes of it. It's just an excuse to exclude women from pinning gold stars on each other at the end. The global gender. Okay, so I already covered this one. Where ideology trips over their own data, they downplay the strongest result. They clearly find strong, near universal support for men must not be weak, with no meaningful moderation by global gender gap index or participant gender. Yet they center a much weaker, inconsistent prescriptive effect, men's agency versus women's communion, as the key double standard and treat the proscription result as background. So the key double standard here is that non-Western countries recognize that when men are held to a standard of strength, it's good that they actually become strong or are strong, right? That's a good thing. Men being strong is a good thing. And when we hold them to a higher standard of strength, men being strong is a good thing, right? Whereas in Western countries, we hold men to a higher standard of strength. Don't be weak, men. But we don't recognize men being strong as good. And that's a double standard that harms women.
Yep.
Maybe we all need a moment to just process that. And yet, and in order to focus that, they just ignore. It's just like they have this huge finding, this gigantic double standard throughout all of humanity that they studied, that men cannot be weak. And that's even worse for men to be weak than women to be strong, right? This huge double standard, prescriptive double standard that men labor under, and they just ignore it. They're just like, oh yeah, that's for a later date. Somebody else has to figure out what to do with that. And that's not a double standard we need to worry about, guys. No. Oh. The giant double standard that they found. No, don't look at that. Don't look behind the curtain. We don't need to deal with that one. That's not important. They treat the prescription as background noise. Inverting motives for men, ignoring material conditions, inventing motives. They claim double standards and trait prescriptions are larger and less gender equal countries, which is consistent with the logic that men's agentic traits are especially desirable in places where they face stronger pressure to fit traditional protector-provider roles. They further suggest that as members of the dominant gender role, because, of course, they're policing it, not policing women out of it, but just policing men in it, men in more gender-equal contexts defensively enforce conformity from other men to protect in-group boundaries, but not in-group boundaries again, like not women, right? They don't police women in this way, just other men. So they're protecting their in-group of men by policing men, not the out-group, women. What's astounding is that this gets published and peer-reviewed, and then people aren't like, wait, you are directly contradicting the thing that you're saying here. How can men have greater in-group policing when they don't police the out-group at all? Like, how can they have greater out-group policing? How can they police women? How can they be seen to be policing their group, men, more if they do nothing to police women? Being, occupying the status markers of men, right? They only do it on men. Anyway. But they never model obvious material drivers. poverty, conflict, informal economies, or how much families depend on individual men's income and physical protection. That to explain why in societies where they also say men can't be weak, they concede that if men are expected to be stronger than women, that it's good that they be stronger than women, unlike Western societies that also expect men to be stronger than women, but consider it be very bad that men actually be stronger than women because we are the smart ones. In harsher environments, the more parsimonious story is that life is tougher and the cost of male failure is higher. Cultures recognize and value male agency more, while the underlying no weakness rule is already universal. So they just value it. But I think what they're actually valuing is not playing silly buggers with their men's brains. Like we're okay with that. We're all like sitting on piles of cash and comfortable surroundings. So we're just like, yeah, let's play a little game of gaslighting with our men. Let's just gaslight the fuck out of them. Let's just do that. Wow, it's gonna be funny.
Yep.
And they're like, no, we don't want to do that because we want our men functional. No, thank you. Maybe that's why a lot of these places are like kicking us out. No, it's so, like even Afghani women, if you can believe it, they were like, they when we were when the U.S. and Canada, because we were part of that, when we were occupying Afghanistan, they were saying, can we, also help our men? Can you do something for them as well? And we were like, no, just gaslighting and mental fuckery for those bastards. Maybe that's one of the reasons why women were like, just, you know what, fuck off. We'll take the burqas. Okay, so
I got a Rumble rant, or not
sure,
a Rumble
go
rant.
ahead.
I got
I'm almost done.
a super
done.
chow, I meant to say. From Laptop 215 for 5, and he says, the fact that people are trying to argue you, albeit weakly, is a good sign. It means you're making some inways into the public consciousness. Thank you, Laptop.
Thanks.
I agree.
All right. So I'm getting to the end. It's not much more. All right. Okay. And then at the end, I'm also going to be talking about how we push back mentally on this bullshit. I mean, we're already doing that, right?
Yeah.
We're already learning to be machines here. But how you push back against the ridiculous gaslighting as a man. Assuming dominant group policing without evidence. The only place the data show men doing more policing men than women is on male agency prescriptions and high global gender gap index contexts. So everybody's policing men, women included, and they don't address that at all. Right? From that, they spin a broad narrative about men as a dominant in-group, harshly enforcing boundaries, despite their own finding that the strongest rule, men must not be weak, is jointly enforced by men and women on men. Right? So they just skirt around the giant elephant in the room, and it's so giant, like you got like, I don't know, a foot of room, and they're just like, oh, look, there's the mouse. That's the big thing that we need to focus on. Found the mouse. From that, they spin a broad, okay. They never show that men police men more than women on that core rule. They simply reassert the dominance narrative and ignore the symmetry. So on the most important, most coercive rule, which is shaming men for being weak, men and women do that equally. Allegedly, they might be more, we can't get into the fine-grained details of who does it more, really, but they basically do it equally. And that's the finding. And they don't want to touch that because it completely destroys their narrative that men are policing each other more because herpaderp, they're a high status group. Even though a lot of them end up being lower status because of the policing. Yeah, that's the thing. Like okay, you know what? I'll keep going. I'm not going to belabor the peasants versus aristocrats thing. It just doesn't make sense. What the results look like without the ideological filler, which is what you all should have been waiting for. Stripped of the frame, the data supports this. Manhood is not a free benefit of being male. It is an earned precarious status that can be lost. Boys and men face stricter rules and harsher sanctions for nonconformity than girls and women, especially around weakness. Across cultures, the central message is not men must be powerful, but men must not be weak. This does not ease in gender equal countries where explicit valuing of male agency is diluted, even though the ban on weakness remains. So men cannot be weak, but it's not good if they're strong in Western countries. That's our equality that we've created. Are you feeling the equality, guys? Doesn't it feel good? Isn't that some great equality? God damn. In harsher societies, stronger prescriptions for male agency function as a psychological buffer. They openly honor the toughness and competence men are expected to display under risk. In gender equal contexts, the costs remain, don't be weak, men, while recognition and honor fade, the worst of both worlds for men. In other words, this is a high-stakes selection regime. Men are forced into a competition where losing carries severe penalties. Those who survive and succeed gain status that is overwhelmingly earned, not bestowed by the privilege fairy. It's earned, while many men are discarded. Calling that payoff unearned privilege while ignoring the selection and casualties is an ideological move, not a scientific conclusion. Oh, that's being really polite. It's bullshit. All right, so how do we neutralize this framing? And in particular, how do you do it internally? Because I know that there are points in this where I almost get sucked into the logic. And then I have to drag myself out, kicking and screaming. There is here's a heuristic you can apply. First, right? When women trot this shit out, feminists trot this shit out, when you hear this, apply this heuristic. First, number one, separate earned status from sex-based privilege. Ask, is this thing men supposedly have attached to their sex, is it attached to their sex or to their performance under threat? So if somebody trots out male privilege, ask yourself, is this something I just get by virtue of being a man, or do I have to earn it, often under considerable stakes? If it is clearly depends on the sustained effort, risk, or harsh standards, i.e. protector-provider roles, leadership under pressure, file it as earned status, not pre-existing privilege. And let me tell you, that means that when men have no privileges, they only have things they've earned. And I think that's the point. Always ask, at what cost? Whenever you see claims of male advantage, force yourself to list the associated costs: risk of injury, death, social disposability, legal burdens, emotional suppression, sanctions for weakness. If the costs are high and unavoidable, refuse to accept unearned privilege as a neutral descriptor. Okay? Yoink. Oh, no, that's not yoink. That's yeet. Yeet. Yoink is what you're trying to do with your self-esteem, or at least maybe self-esteem is the wrong word. Trying to do with your sense of peace, inner peace. Yoink it back from this bullshit. 3, check whether the metric is one-sided. When you hear more equal country, ask what's being measured. Is it something like global gender gap index that only registers women's disadvantages? Remember, male burdens literally do not exist in that number. Do not let your moral intuitions be steered by one-sided gauge. I've called this for years orphan statistics. Statistics that only look at the situation for women in terms of victimhood and only look at the situation for men in terms of villainy, perpetration. Yeah. Always make sure whatever statistics, if a feminist comes at you with 257 billion% of women are raped in a single moment every instance on the universe, just say, well, what's the rate for men? And if she doesn't come out back with anything, say, well, that's an orphan statistic. Yoink. No. Yoink. No. Yeet. I'll get those two eventually. Okay, flip the sexes and see if the story would be called oppression. Take their pattern and imagine it applied to women. Women must not show weakness in 95% of countries, and this doesn't ease with equality. Women must constantly prove womanhood under threat of expulsion. Oh, also, women can't be weak, but they also can't, it's not good for women to be strong. Women can't be uncertain, but they can't seem to know too much. Women can't be fearful, but they also shouldn't be brave. If we made women walk this line, feminism would explode, and it would be like a nuclear bomb in human history. Of like, they would just be you could just imagine this gigantic explosion of incoherent, hysterical screeching that reaches Pluto. It's like you see like a bunch of aliens in their ship out in like the Oort cloud, right? And they're just like, whoa, what the hell was that? It would be feminists reacting to if this double standard was applied to women. Okay. Women must constantly prove womanhood under threat of expulsion. If everyone would call that oppression or exploitation of women, but cost of privilege for men, treat the original framing as ideological, not factual. Okay, I got 7 of these and we're on 5. 5, treat men as privileged as a hypothesis, not a law. At this point, I don't even think you need to treat it as a hypothesis, but if it helps you keep in a state of cool detachment, then do so. When you see circular moves, men have power because patriarchy exists because men have power. Label them mentally as story, not explanation, and a very convenient circular story as well.
Yes.
Ask what evidence would falsify the claim. If nothing could, downgrade it to dogma. You're going to be doing a lot of downgrading to dogma. Just practice a kind of a yeet kind of move. The next time somebody tries to bring this shit to you, just follow this
Yeet
heuristic.
is getting rid of it, and
Yeet.
yoink is taking it. So just look at it that way.
Yeet. Okay, anchor your own narrative in reciprocity. Replace men are guilty, women are owed with men and women owe each other for different kinds of risk and labor. That's if you need to go, you're dealing with some black pill stuff, right? If you need to step away from that, then women can, essentially this is judge women by their behavior and extend protection and provision based on that, right? If they are good women, perhaps they deserve your protection and provision if they are willing to be grateful for it, right? But that's entirely your choice. Remind yourself regularly, men have paid heavily for the roles that they fill. Acknowledging that cost is basic honesty, not betrayal of women.
Yes.
Yeah, right? It's not betrayal of women. And a lot of men struggle with this, right? They think that understanding these things and integrating them in their life means that they're going to be betraying women or not caring about women. I think it's almost impossible to make men not care about women. I mean, women have really pushed it to the point where I don't think it's that men don't care about women. It's just that they're distancing themselves from it, right? More than anything. So it's really hard to make men not care about women. And I think a lot of this is self-protective for men because they're concerned that they will stop caring about women. It's unlikely to happen. It's like I say, saying that you care about women is like male feminists are constantly self-stimming over stuff like that. Oh, we care about women. Yeah, that's the baseline, dude. Right?
Yeah.
Caring about women, most men do. Okay? It's like sort of built into the beast. So really the point is don't worry about that. Worry about making sure that the women you care about are worth it. Yep. Notice why you're jumping. I've never attacked you and you're like jumping every time I put my head fits down. Notice I'm being a little bit, it's because she attacked me today. I'm a little salty. Notice when guilt is being used as a control tactic. If an argument leaves men with total responsibility and no legitimate way to be good, except through endless atonement, flag it as a manipulative frame, not a moral truth. Consciously withdraw your emotional buy-in. I can evaluate evidence and ethics without accepting inherited guilt. Used consistently, these checks make it harder for pre-existing male privilege story to hijack your understanding. You're not denying that men must sometimes misuse power. Okay, and this is just for the guys who are worried that, oh my God, you're allowing men to be evil. No, nobody's saying that men aren't capable of doing this stuff. We're saying women are also capable of doing it and do it a lot. That's it.
Yes.
Right. And this manipulation is wrong. One of the big, and also this freaking study is trying to make men policing men, which is the basis of the justice system and all the protections that women enjoy, even from their own violence, the violence of other women, as a bad thing. No. You're refusing a framework that erases male sacrifice and treats any earned status under threat as an original sin. Okay, so those are the 7 things you have to ask yourself when someone comes at you with any allegation of male privilege, especially based on this piece of shit that we just read. Okay. All right, Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, it's pretty in depth. I guess I would just say, like, another thing I think you should be asking yourself is, why are they doing this? Like, what do they want? I know they want to make money, and I know they want to get power, but what would be another side effect of them if they got their way? If they were like able to say, we got to defeat patriarchy by essentially like removing men's gender roles too. Like, patriarchy hurts men too. Like, how would they see that addressed? And what does that look like? And do we want that? That's all. I would just pose it, out there for you guys to think about. So I saw somebody said in the chat. Well, let me see where it says here. Did somebody take it down? Oh no, here we go. Murder of Crow says, seems like the average man is in a Mexican standoff with masculinity on one side and women and their feminists on the other. I don't see it that way. Like, masculinity is not your enemy. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't let these people create the framing of what masculinity is. Don't let anybody do that. Okay? But you know what it is. It's in you. It's inside of you instinctively. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's not bad to be a man. This is, it's okay to be male, right? And that's what I want to, because I think that I don't want to like tell people how to live. And I don't want to make a prescription about like how your life should be. I want to allow people the freedom to choose to live how they want. But I do that with the recognition that most people are going to fall into the general like box of what it is to be a man or what it is to be a woman. And that there's no shame to that. And people who want to shatter that open, they do that under the guise of liberty, but they're really trying to control you in a different way. It's like a reverse control, I guess, where they're saying, well, we just want you to feel like you don't have to be a man. But they don't want you to be a man, because if you say, well, what if I want to be a man? What if I want to lift weights? What if I want to like eat healthy? What if I want a nice car? What if I want to earn some money? What if I want to start my own business? Right? No, they call all those things toxically masculine traits. They literally write articles about how going to the gym, eating meat, wanting a nice car, buying a house, like building your own business. All of these things are like bad things. So like, well, okay, then what do they want? And I think that like it's a good thing to think about is all I'm asking. So anyway, and I don't see it the way that you are, you seem to see it. So, but anyway, that's all I would add to that is ask yourself why they're doing this.
Yeah. Okay. So, let's see. The final thing I wanted to point out is definitely don't here are the serious problems with this and how they fail as serious academic research. They ignore their own stronger finding. They fixate on a relatively small pattern in prescriptions, men's agency versus women's communion, and never integrate the much stronger, nearly universal pattern in proscriptions. Men must not be weak, even though their own models show gender equality does not change that. So they don't actually address their findings. They just go with the weaker and more inconsistent finding that works sort of with their ideology. Motives assumed, alternatives ignore. They automatically interpret men's higher endorsement of male agency as a defensive move to protect dominance and in-group boundaries, rather than considering non-pathologizing explanations. For example, men knowing from experience that other men need to be competent and agentic for things to work, especially under high expectations. Inconsistent use of gender. When men are harsher on male nonconformity, it's taken as evidence of dominant group boundary policing. When women are similarly harsh, including in other literatures, that possibility is not explored at all. Admitting the theory doesn't actually fit the data. They concede that defensive response to equalities theory story cannot illuminate why participant gender does not interact with gender equality for prescriptions like men cannot be weak. But instead of re-examining the dominance in-group premise, they just park it. Thus must await further investigation. Herp-a-derp. This is bad science. This is phenomenally bad science, and it is a perfect example of all of the science. Like this is not like you could pull. I mean, honestly, this is not the worst. Some of the worst is the female semiotics of the water lily, the feminist semiotics of the water lily. But this is not the worst. But it is. If you just randomly pull out a bit of feminist scholarship, you will find stuff just like this. And I see Nick Redding is in the chat.
He left.
Yeah. Apparently he's still upset because we're crypto feminists or something.
Sure.
Okay, so I've come up with a formula. As Allison has rented a second house, the likelihood that some good will happen for men approaches 1. Well, actually, the Badger Cave was purchased like 10 years ago now. And it did actually underwrite the International Conference for Men's Issues 2019, so it could be in a hotel, which I didn't get to go to because I was stopped at the border because probably I'm on a blacklist with Homeland Security. So, yeah, I mean, you can bitch and whine about what we are or aren't doing, but we have done a lot of in-person stuff, and we continue to do in-person stuff. But unfortunately, there's a lot of forces arrayed against us doing it. But, and if you want to take part in any kind of activism that is taking action in terms of men's issues, we're going to be putting on another event in Calgary this year in September. So, mark September down on your calendars, probably the first week, and get out there and we'll have the discussion and we'll talk about how we can go forward in public with men's issues. All right. So there you go. Remember, guys, first week, September, mark it on your calendars. If you want to start making this more public and bringing it into the real world, then, start planning to come and take part. All right. So I'm going to hand that back to Brian.
All right. Are we?
Yeah, I have nothing left to say.
All right. Well, yeah, no problem. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. What's going on with my thing here? Okay. Hit the bell for notifications. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of Maintaining Frame. And we will talk to you all in the next one.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.